How long does it take for people to recover from sciatica? And can we do anything to accelerate that recovery process? Sciatica is a debilitating and extremely painful condition, but not all cases of sciatica are the same. Everybody will sort of experience it a little bit differently. Wouldn't it be really useful to know if we can categorize people into different groups and based off of the groups that they're in, bucket them into different treatment plans so that we can have the treatment that's right for them? Well, let's find out if that's possible. We're going to review an article by Constantinou et al. That was published in 2020 in Lancet Rheumatology, and it is the SCOPiC trial. The full title of the study is Stratified Care versus Usual Care for Management of Patients Presenting with Sciatica in Primary Care, a randomized controlled trial. So the goal of this study was to compare people that are in a usual care group, so people who just go to their general practitioner. Their GP will then send them to a physio, and their physio would just sort of dictate the best treatment plan according to their presentation, which is what would typically happen in the real world, versus a stratified care group. And the stratified care group is basically bucketing different patients into different management plans depending on their presentation. So let's talk about those different management plans and what those different presentations were that dictated which sort of treatment plan those patients should be stratified into. I'm going to go into quite a bit of detail into how they actually stratified the different groups here because I think it's really, really important to understand, as I'll come back to later on. So here is how they created the stratification algorithm. In video form, I'm going to share what this algorithm looked like. So they use something called the Start Back tool, and that's just a questionnaire where you could get a score of 0 to 9, and it asks you about your back pain symptoms as well as some psychological factors associated with that. So if you score equal to or less than 3, you were considered low risk, and you were in group 1. So this is where you have 2 sessions with a physiotherapist. Okay? If you scored greater than 3, you were categorized into either medium risk or high risk. And then to differentiate between medium and high risk, they used 2 main things. One was the psychological subscale scores from the Start Back tool. So again, the Start Back tool is scored from 0 to 9, but within that, there's questions that refer more so to psychological elements of the person's condition, and that's scored from 0 to 5. So they looked at that score from 0 to 5, and then they also looked at certain clinical observations. And those things were having a leg pain that was rated 6 out of 10 or more, pain below the knee, any interference with work or home activities, again, rated at a 6 out of 10 or more, and also if there was an objective sensory deficit. Based off of if you had a lot of those characteristics and a high psychological subscale score, then you were classified into the high risk group. And then if it was sort of a medium amount, then you were in the medium risk group. If you were in the high risk group, which is group 3, the treatment plan that you got was fast tracked. So instead of seeing a physio first, you had an MRI, and that was done within 4 weeks or so. And you also were sent to see a spine specialist who would then evaluate you to see if you required any more invasive procedures like an injection or surgery. If you were in the medium risk group, you were sent to physiotherapy for up to 6 sessions. Let's talk about the participants. So they were all 18 years of older. They all had a clinical diagnosis of sciatica. They had not received any treatment for the sciatica in the last 3 months, and any serious pathology or very serious physical or mental comorbidity excluded you from being eligible for this trial. All right, so we have these patients with sciatica, we have usual care, and we have stratified care. So trying to give people the best possible treatment depending on how they present. Are there any differences between those two? So the primary outcome that they looked at was the time to the first resolution of their symptoms from the point when they were first randomized into the different groups. And this was defined either as a complete recovery or much better. And there was practically no difference between the two groups. The median time to symptom resolution in the stratified care group was 10 weeks versus 12 in the usual care group, but this was not statistically significant. So we can't say that there was actually a difference between these two groups. They also looked at a lot of secondary outcomes, some of which include physical function, fear of movement, global perceived change, usual back pain, usual leg pain, and nothing differed between these two groups. So when we go into the conclusions that the researchers made, let me read this quote to you. We did not find convincing evidence that the stratified care model tested in this trial, so combining prognostic information with clinical criteria, led to faster resolution of sciatica symptoms or benefits for other patient outcomes compared to usual care. I think it's important not to jump the gun here and say that, stratified care will never be better for patients with sciatica. Maybe it is possible to bucket people into different categories to then find the most optimal treatment for them. But right now, we don't have a good idea of what that is. In fact, the authors actually discuss how this is a limitation to their study. They looked at some stats in the past related to their algorithm, and they found that it had a 22% positive predictive value. Stay with me for a second. What that means is that 22% of the people that were allocated to group 3 to get that fast-tracked care, so they got that MRI very, very quickly, and then they saw a spine specialist for either to see if they needed injection or surgery, anything a little bit more invasive. 22% of those people were correctly sent to that group. So almost 80% of people that were fast-tracked shouldn't have been. So the authors used an algorithm that's the best one available right now. And it's not like on paper it's a bad algorithm, right? We're looking at objective testing, we're looking at psychological factors, and we're looking at physical painful factors related to people's function. So it's not like it's this very unidimensional algorithm, but right now it's not that great, and it's not an algorithm that results in better care and better outcomes, and it's actually less cost effective because now we're getting more MRIs for a lot of people that don't actually need them. So that's one reason I'm bringing up this study, because on one hand, right now, we can't necessarily bucket people into different categories in order to accelerate their recovery. Maybe one day that will be possible. There was no genetic testing done in this study, right? But maybe one day we could find genes, or we could find lifestyle factors or certain ages where maybe we can bucket people into different treatment plans in order to sort of accelerate things, but we can't just yet. I also wanted to bring up this study to talk about the natural history of sciatica. How long does it actually take for people to get better? So let me read this for you, and I'm actually going to put this chart up on video so that you can see this as well. So by 12 weeks, approximately 50% of participants in both arms had reported first resolution of symptoms. By the end of the follow-up period at 12 months, 74% of patients in the stratified care arm and 71% of patients in the usual care arm had reported resolution of symptoms. When we look at the median amount of physiotherapy sessions in the usual care group and the stratified care group, it was only 2 physio sessions. And we still see that 50% of participants had reported first resolution of their symptoms at just 3 months. Now, at a year, that's 71 to 74% of people reporting first resolution of symptoms. So there's still a handful of people that have not gotten better at the end of a year. And we see that out of the people that do get better, a lot of them get better within those first 3 months. I think it's important to understand these natural histories of the conditions, because when someone with sciatica asks you, how long will this condition last? You can't say for sure, but you can reference things like this chart here, where you could actually show them the general trajectory of how long it takes for people to get better. So there you have it. This is just one study. There are other studies out there that look at prognostic factors and how long it takes for people to recover from sciatica, but this is one that you can use as an example. So I hope you learned something. As always, you could reach out to me through my email, which is in the show notes.